I just make a video about Gilmore Girls? Yes. But ever since, I just can't stop thinking about this premise, so here I am. I'm doing another video. Sorry. Today I'm going to be giving book recommendations for Gilmore Girl characters. So in my head this is like, oh, this Gilmore Girl character, like, this is what I would recommend to them. But it can also work the other way. Based off of your favorite Gilmore Girl character, maybe this is the book you should read. Basically, I got way too into this idea, so let's just get started. I'm gonna save the girls for last because obviously that's the main event. Let's start off with an easy one, Paris. So for Paris, I would recommend The Prince by Machiavelli. I feel like this makes so much sense. This bitch is obsessed with power, she wants to be number one, and also she would just love reading The Prince just so she can talk about The Prince and how she's read it, you know? That one was the most clear cut to me. So then another like kind of side character that isn't very well loved, Logan. For Logan, I would recommend American Psycho. I don't like this book, let me say that right away. I think this book is perfect for Logan because he would think he's like deep for liking it, you know? The premise behind American Psycho is so abundantly clear. Like, it's just, they're just hitting you in the face. Like, this is what I'm trying to say over and over and over. Anyone reading this book can understand that it's supposed to be a parody of a certain lifestyle, of a certain group, but it's also just like dumb. I guess I should summarize this. If you don't know what American Psycho is, this book written by Bret Easton Ellis. It follows Patrick Bateman, who is a psychopath. He also works on Wall Street. It has a lot of violence against women throughout it. The themes aren't very subtle, but again, I think Logan would be one of those guys who thinks he's like intellectual for understanding the themes that are being thrown in your face every 2 seconds. And also it's like not a good book, and I don't think if he read books that he would have good taste. Then to follow down the line of boyfriends, next I'm going to talk about Dean. So Dean, I pictured him being into popular literature if anything. I know in the beginning of the series they try to make it seem like he reads, but then they completely disregard that when they decide to get tired of that character, and he doesn't appreciate reading by the end of it. Like, it's pretty obvious he's not a reader in my opinion. I think if he read anything, it would be Pop Lit. I also, if he read anything, I could see Dean being like a little bit of a sci-fi nerd. I feel like the vibes match, maybe that's just me. So for Dean, I would recommend The Martian by Andy Weir, I don't know how to say his name. This book follows an astronaut named Mark. He's one of the first people to step on Mars, but then something happens, his team thinks he's dead, they all leave in like this big emergency. He's actually alive, he's stuck on the planet, he has to figure out how to survive. The best thing about this book, in my opinion, is the cover. I think the cover is beautiful. Personally, I didn't like this book, but this is a book that I can understand why people really enjoy it. It's really humorous, it's easy to read, it's just kind of fun. So, given that it's a really accessible book for someone that I don't feel like would read much, Dean, I think he would like it. Next is Jess. Jess I had fun with. I could think of so many books to recommend for him. I didn't like him the first time I watched Gilmore Girls, like when I was much younger. Now I am in love with Jess. He's the best of the boyfriends by far. So I have 2 answers for Jess, and in my mind, both of these are for like the teenage Jess, not when he's older and he's like more mature and not just angsty. So the first book I thought of is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This is a dark academia novel. It follows a group of students at Yale who are into some weird shit. I feel like this isn't a novel you can really explain to someone because it's a very, very slow burn. So by the time you really figure out what's happening, you're towards the end of the book, so anything I can say would be spoilery. The reason I recommend this for Jess is because he is a reader, first of all. So this is a more of a literary fiction novel. I think he would appreciate that and the nice, like, beautiful writing. But at the same time, it's still very dark and it's still kind of edgy, which obviously Jess, any book I recommend for him has to be like that. And then the next book, when I thought of this one for Jess, I was like, oh shit. This is it. This is the book for angsty teenage Jess. Journey to the End of the Night by Louis Ferdinand Céline. This is another book that isn't easy to explain. For this one, it's more because nothing really happens in it, to be honest. You're following this main character as he travels throughout the world. It starts with the First World War in France. He travels to Africa, he travels to America. The whole time he's just like this useless piece of shit. Maybe that's a little, that's the point. But this book is so nihilistic. It's so angsty. I can really picture teenage boys who are a little emo getting way too into this and just the havoc that would cause. I will also say, which I will say anytime I mention this book, the author's a piece of shit. Like, basically a Nazi. I'm not sure if he was a Nazi himself or if he just was okay with the Nazis. He's terrible. Anyway, I don't feel like that would faze an angsty teenage boy, to be honest, especially an angsty teenage boy in the early 2000s. I really feel like this book, with its like very nihilistic, everything is meaningless theme, would greatly appeal to Jess. And then to go in a little bit more lighthearted direction, since we're going through all of Rory's friends basically right now. Next I want to talk about Lane. Lane I had a bit of an issue with because she's not much of a reader. Her main thing is obviously music, and to be honest, there's not like too much outside of that we see for her character. So that led me in the direction of poetry instead of like a novel. For Lane, I would recommend just in general Sylvia Plath's poetry. So obviously poetry is very lyrical. It can tie into music in that way. Also, Lane's band is more of like a rock band, I guess is how you would categorize it. And Plath's poetry is really hard-hitting and kind of harsh at times, so I feel like that kind of fits in with Lane and her band and musical taste. Then to move on to the other best friend, Suki. Suki was one that was almost a little bit too easy for me. Suki has huge mom vibes, obviously. So for me, that just made me picture like a cozy little contemporary novel, something that some people kind of refer to as fluff. Like, I picture Suki being the kind of mom who like goes to a beach and like has, like her little vacation read that she's sitting and reading on the beach. This isn't a genre that I have read much of though, so it was a little bit harder for me to figure out which specific book to choose. And I ended up going with Landline by Rainbow Rowell. Rainbow Rowell is, I feel like I can never say her last name right. She, for the longest time, was just like a YA contemporary romance writer. In this novel, she breached into the adult genre. Basically, you're following this married couple. They're having issues in their marriage. They still love each other, but that's kind of beside the point. Her husband goes on a family vacation without her, essentially, and she's left alone at home, and she discovers the old landline phone that they used to talk on. There's kind of a mystical element to it where she can use that phone to talk to her husband, like at the age that he was when they first met. So it's kind of like you can kind of time travel through the phone, and it reminds her of why she loves him. And she uses this opportunity to like explore her relationship and why she loved her husband in the first place, or if she thinks that they may have been better off never getting married. So it's a little bit more serious, I guess, but Rainbow Rowell is a really like fun, quirky writer, and I feel like that really fits with Suki and who she is. I do think she would really like this book. And then just so I'm leaving all Gilmore Girls for the very last, next I'll talk about Luke. Luke was so hard. Like, I think this was the hardest person on this list to find a book for. He's very dad energy, but he doesn't seem like someone who reads. Anytime that they're in the show, he just seems to be like kind of annoyed with all the pop culture, like the movies and stuff that they watch, even though like he's obviously kind of enjoying it just because he loves Lorelai. But my first instinct for Luke was to go with like a Stephen King novel, just because my dad always read Stephen King, so in my head Stephen King is a very like dad type of book to read. But then Stephen King is also kind of weird, and I feel like Luke would hate that. So after a long deliberation, I finally arrived at Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. This one is based purely just on like vibes. This is an American classic. The writing is pretty plain. It's got like hearty vibe. I don't know. To me, this is a book that someone would like if that person also really likes fishing. Maybe I'm being a little bit too hard on Steinbeck here now that I'm saying these things and I'm realizing what my thoughts are. But in my mind, it still works. Moving on. Emily. I could not picture Emily reading anything but Jane Austen. I do not believe that if Emily reads, she has ever picked up a book that wasn't classic literature. And I think that Austen specifically is perfect for Emily because it has that like upper class, sophisticated air. So the book that I chose to go for specifically though was Emma. Partially because that's my favorite book by Jane Austen, kind of the only Jane Austen I'm into, but also because I think that the character of Emma fits Emily pretty well. Clearly throughout the book, Emma has an issue with like trying to fix people and bring them into her standards, and really she just needs to let people live and be who they are, which screams Emily to me. So I don't know, maybe she could learn something from that. Okay, now we're down to the last two. I'm gonna save Rory for last because she's the reader, so I feel like that has to be more the main event. Lorelai, this was one of the easiest books for me to pick out. For Lorelai, I would recommend Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney. This book is very messy, it's very real. You're following the main character as she starts to have a relationship with a married man. She also has all these issues in her home life, especially with her father, with her best friend. There's just a lot of tensions in relationships. No one in this book is like morally great. Everyone's messy. It's also very real though. People aren't perfect, people fuck up, people continuously fuck up and don't learn from their mistakes. That aspect of it I think would really appeal to Lorelai. Lorelai is very real. Lorelai is very messy. She doesn't pretend to be anything that she isn't. Sally Rooney is also really hip right now. I feel like that goes with Lorelai too. She stays on the trends. Like, she's aware of pop culture. I think she would really like Sally Rooney. And then last but not least, we have borrego. This one was difficult because she reads so much. So first of all, she could have maybe read this book. I don't know when it came out. Let me check that. Okay, it was published in 2011. So she wouldn't have read it on the show. But this is exactly the kind of book they would have included on the show. That book is My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. God, I love this book. I love this book so much. I've heard people compare it to a modern day Jane Austen, which I think makes a lot of sense, but I also think it's much better than Jane Austen. So this book follows the stories of two best friends, Elena and Lila. You follow these girls through adolescence and also as they grow older throughout the series. It's a really close but also really messy friendship. And then through this lens, you're also exploring poverty, class, patriarchy, post-war Italy, fascism in some instances, they touch on that. This book is so layered, but it's also beautiful. It's also very low-key, like you're just focusing on the story of these people who grew up in this small town in Italy, but it's so much more than that. It's really compelling. This is just a beautiful novel. I think it's perfect for Rory because it's literary. You have that beautiful writing, you have that complexity in themes and layers, but it's also very good. Like, not to say that literary fiction isn't always good, but this is a very compelling book. This is a book that you read and for some reason you can't stop reading. I feel like it can also sometimes fall into like popular literature. This is a very well-known book, which is even a better reason for Rory to read it. Throughout the series, she's always reading not only classics, but also popular books that everyone talks about. And then at the same time, I can't believe I forgot to mention this, it's also very feminist. Like, you're following two badass female characters as they're fighting for themselves and what they want. There's a lot there. I think Rory would love it, and I really wish she could have read it in the series and I could have heard her thoughts on it. So that's all for today, you guys. I hope someone out here can appreciate me rambling about Gilmore Girls. Hopefully this will be the last Gilmore Girls centric video I make so that I don't go too overboard with it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon with another video. Bye!